The evening light filtered through the dusty windows of the general store in Prescott, Arizona Territory, catching on the auburn hair of the young woman who stood motionless before a display of seed packets, her fingers trembling as she touched the faded illustration of roses on the paper. Clara Mitchell had arrived in this harsh frontier town 6 months ago, following her aunt and uncle after her mother's death from consumption, had left her orphaned in Missouri. And every day since she had felt the ache of missing the lush garden her mother had tended with such devotion, the rows of vegetables and flowering plants that had made their small homestead feel like paradise even in difficult times. Now Clara lived in a cramped room behind her uncle's leather shop, where the smell of tanning hides and saddle oil had replaced the perfume of honeysuckle and lavender. The Arizona Territory in 1883 was nothing like the green countryside of her childhood. The land here stretched brown and unforgiving under a merciless sun, dotted with scrub brush and cacti that seemed to mock her longing for the gentle gardens of home. Water was precious, rationed carefully from wells that threatened to run dry each summer. The idea of growing anything beautiful felt like an impossible dream. She set the seed packet down with a sigh, knowing she could not afford even that small luxury on the meager wages her uncle paid her for mending harnesses and stitching leather goods. Clara turned toward the door, adjusting the shawl around her shoulders despite the heat, when she collided directly with a solid wall of muscle and denim. "Steady there, miss," a deep voice said, and strong hands caught her elbows to keep her from stumbling backward. Clara looked up into a pair of startling blue eyes set in a sun-bronzed face. The man was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a square jaw shadowed with stubble. He wore the dusty clothing of a working cowboy, his shirt rolled to the elbows revealing forearms corded with muscle, a bandana tied loosely around his neck. He was perhaps 25 or 26, young but with the weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors. "I apologize," Clara said quickly, stepping back from his grasp, her cheeks warming. "I was not watching where I was going. No harm done." His voice held a hint of amusement, and one corner of his mouth lifted in a smile that transformed his serious face into something altogether more appealing. "You looked like you were 1,000 miles away." "Something like that," Clara admitted, glancing back at the seed display despite herself. The cowboy followed her gaze, and something shifted in his expression, a softening around his eyes. "You a gardener? My mother was." The words came out before she could stop them, carrying more emotion than she intended. "I helped her. But here in this place nothing will grow. The soil is too poor, the sun too harsh, the water too scarce." He studied her for a long moment, those blue eyes seeming to see more than she wanted to reveal. "Plenty of things grow here if you know how to coax them. Mesquite, palo verde, all manner of desert plants. They are just different from what you are accustomed to, I would wager. It is not the same as roses and tomatoes and sweet peas climbing a trellis," Clara said, then felt foolish for sharing something so personal with a stranger. "No," he agreed quietly. "I suppose it is not." An awkward silence fell between them. Clara became aware of the curious stares of other customers in the store, of the impropriety of standing so close to this man, speaking to him without a proper introduction. "I should go. Good day, sir." "Wait." He reached out but did not touch her, his hand falling back to his side almost immediately. "My name is James Thornton. I work at the Circle R Ranch about 10 miles north of town. I am in Prescott most Saturdays if you need anything at all." Clara was not sure what to make of the earnest expression on his face or the unexpected offer. "Clara Mitchell. I live with my aunt and uncle. They own the leather shop on Cortez Street. Mitchell, James repeated, as if committing it to memory. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Mitchell." She nodded, clutching her reticule tightly, and hurried past him out into the bright afternoon. Her heart beat faster than it should have, and she told herself it was merely from the surprise of the collision, nothing more. Yet as she walked through the dusty streets back to her uncle's shop, she found herself thinking of blue eyes and a kind voice, of the way James Thornton had looked at her as if she mattered. The leather shop smelled as pungent as always when Clara pushed through the door. Her uncle, Thomas Mitchell, glanced up from the saddle he was working on, his weathered face creased with its habitual frown. He was her mother's older brother, a man who had come west 15 years earlier to make his fortune and had instead found only hard work and harder living. His wife, Aunt Margaret, was a thin, nervous woman who rarely smiled and seemed to resent Clara's presence as an additional burden. "You took your time," Uncle Thomas said gruffly. "Those harness straps need finishing before Monday." "Yes, Uncle." Clara moved past him to the back room where she worked, settling onto her stool before the workbench. Her fingers automatically reached for the leather and tools, beginning the familiar motions of stitching and riveting. It was tedious work that left her hands cramped and her eyes tired, but she was grateful to have a place to live, even if it felt nothing like home. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Clara thought about her mother's garden. She could picture it so clearly. The way the morning glories opened with the dawn, the heavy heads of sunflowers tracking the sun across the sky, the neat rows of beans and squash and lettuce. Her mother had spent hours there, her skirts kilted up and her hands deep in the soil, humming old songs as she worked. Even when the consumption had begun to steal her strength, she had tended her plants, refusing to let them go to ruin. The garden had been the last thing she spoke of before she died, asking Clara to water the roses one more time. Clara had done so, but within a month, her father had sold their homestead to pay debts, and she had been sent to live with her uncle. The garden was gone now, plowed under by the new owners or left to grow wild. The loss of it felt like losing her mother all over again. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by dreams of green growing things withering in desert heat. The following Saturday, Clara accompanied her aunt to the market square where farmers and merchants set up stalls to sell their goods. Aunt Margaret needed fabric for a new dress and enlisted Clara to help carry packages. The market was crowded with people, horses, and wagons, a chaos of sound and movement. Clara found it overwhelming after the quiet isolation of the leather shop. "Stay close," Aunt Margaret instructed sharply. "And do not dawdle, we have much to accomplish today." They were examining bolts of calico when Clara heard her name called. She turned to see James Thornton approaching through the crowd, his hat in his hands, a smile lighting his face. Her heart did an unexpected flip in her chest. "Miss Mitchell, what a pleasant surprise," he said, nodding respectfully to both women. "Madam," he added, addressing Aunt Margaret. Aunt Margaret's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Do we know you, young man?" "James Thornton, madam. I met your niece at the general store last week." "I work at the Circle R Ranch. A cowboy," Aunt Margaret said, her tone making it clear what she thought of that profession. "Come along, Clara. We have no time for idle conversation." But James was not deterred. "If I might have just a moment, madam. I wanted to speak with Miss Mitchell about something that may be of interest to her." Clara's curiosity overcame her aunt's disapproval. "What is it, Mr. Thornton?" He shifted his weight, looking almost nervous, which seemed at odds with his confident bearing. "I have been thinking about what you said, about missing your mother's garden. There is something I want to show you if you would allow me. It would not take long, and you would be properly chaperoned, of course." "I do not think that is appropriate," Aunt Margaret began, but Clara surprised herself by interrupting. "What is it you want to show me?" "A place where things grow," James said simply. "A place I think you would appreciate. We could ride out after church tomorrow if your aunt and uncle permit. I would have you back before supper." The thought of seeing anything green, anything alive and growing, filled Clara with a longing so fierce it almost hurt. "Please, Aunt Margaret, I would very much like to go." Her aunt looked between them, her expression sour. "I will speak with your uncle. But do not get your hopes up, girl. He may not approve of you riding around the countryside with strange men." "Thank you," Clara said, meaning it. James caught her eye and smiled, a warm, genuine expression that made her feel seen for the first time since arriving in Arizona. Uncle Thomas was surprisingly agreeable when approached about the outing, though his reasons were transparent. "The Circle R is one of our best customers," he told Clara that evening. "The foreman orders new tack from us regularly. If this young cowboy has taken an interest in you, it would be foolish to discourage him. Marriage to a ranch hand would be a practical arrangement and would relieve us of the burden of your keep." The blunt assessment stung, but Clara was accustomed to her uncle's lack of sentiment. At least he was allowing her to go, even if his motivations were mercenary rather than kind. She spent Saturday night in a state of nervous anticipation, wondering what James wanted to show her, wondering why he had sought her out at all. She was no beauty, she knew, with her too straight nose and too wide mouth. Her only remarkable features were her auburn hair and her green eyes, inherited from her mother. Why would a man like James Thornton, who surely could have his pick of women, bother with her? Sunday morning dawned clear and hot. Clara dressed in her best day dress, a simple cotton print in blue that was already becoming too warm for the Arizona climate, and pinned her hair up carefully. Her aunt watched her preparations with pursed lips, but said nothing beyond reminding her to be home by 6 o'clock. James arrived at 2, riding a handsome buckskin horse and leading a gentle-looking mare. Uncle Thomas came out to speak with him, and Clara watched through the window as the two men conversed. Whatever James said seemed to satisfy her uncle, for he nodded curtly and called for Clara to come out. "Be respectful and mind your manners," Uncle Thomas instructed. "Mr. Thornton has promised to return you unharmed and with your reputation intact." "Yes, Uncle." Clara allowed James to help her onto the mare, acutely aware of his hands at her waist, the strength in his grip. She settled into the side saddle, adjusting her skirts, and took up the reins. They rode out of town at an easy pace, James keeping his horse close beside hers. For a while neither spoke, but it was a comfortable silence, not awkward. The landscape stretched around them, all browns and dusty greens, mountains rising purple in the distance. The sun beat down mercilessly, but there was something beautiful about the vastness of it, the sense of space and sky. "How long have you been in Arizona?" James asked eventually. 6 months, Clara replied. "Since January. My mother died in December and I had nowhere else to go." "I am sorry for your loss." He said it simply, without the flowery sympathy that so often rang hollow. "My own mother passed when I was 16. It is a hard thing, losing the person who knew you best." Clara glanced at him, surprised by the shared experience. "Yes, that is exactly it. She understood me in a way no one else does, and her garden was an extension of that, a place where I felt close to her. Does that sound foolish? Not at all." James guided his horse around a stand of prickly pear. "My mother loved to sing, old Irish ballads mostly. For years after she died, I could not bear to hear music. It hurt too much. But eventually, I realized that remembering the songs was a way of keeping her with me. Perhaps a garden could be the same for you." "Perhaps," Clara agreed, though she did not see how that was possible in this arid land. "Where are we going?" Not much farther. There is a canyon about a mile ahead. It has a spring, and the walls provide shade. Things grow there that do not survive out here in the open. They rode on, the horses' hooves raising small clouds of dust. Clara found herself relaxing in James's presence, the tension that normally knotted her shoulders easing. He pointed out various plants and birds, showing a knowledge of the desert that spoke of years spent learning its secrets. She liked the way he spoke, quietly and without arrogance, and the way he looked at her when she asked questions, as if her interest mattered. The canyon appeared almost suddenly, a cleft in the earth that dropped away before them. James dismounted and helped Clara down, then led both horses along a narrow trail that switched back down the rocky slope. The temperature dropped noticeably as they descended, and Clara could hear the sound of running water. At the bottom, the canyon opened into a small oasis. A spring bubbled up from between two boulders, forming a clear pool before trickling away down the canyon floor. And all around the water, growing in the shade of the high walls, were plants. Not the sparse, thorny vegetation of the desert above, but actual greenery. Ferns clustered near the water. Small wildflowers bloomed in crevices. A gnarled cottonwood tree spread its branches over the pool, its leaves rustling in the faint breeze. Clara stood staring, unable to speak. It was not her mother's garden, but it was green and alive, and the sight of it brought tears to her eyes. "I thought you might like it," James said softly. "Not many people know about this place. I come here sometimes when I need quiet." "It is beautiful," Clara whispered. She moved closer to the pool, kneeling beside it to trail her fingers in the cool water. "I cannot believe such a place exists here. The desert is full of surprises if you know where to look." James knelt beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "But I did not bring you here just to show you the spring. I wanted to ask you something." Clara looked at him, her pulse quickening. In the dappled light filtering through the cottonwood, he looked younger, more vulnerable. "What did you want to ask?" He took a breath, as if gathering courage. "Would you allow me to court you properly? I know we have only just met, and you may think me forward, but from the moment I saw you in that store, looking at those seed packets with such longing, I felt something. A connection. And I would like the chance to see if you feel it too." Clara's heart hammered in her chest. No man had ever expressed interest in her before. She had always been too quiet, too bookish, too absorbed in helping her mother. And now this handsome cowboy, this man who barely knew her, was asking permission to court her. It felt like a dream. "I do not understand," she said carefully. "Why me?" "You must meet many women." "I meet women," James agreed. "But I have never met one who looked at a packet of seeds the way you did, as if your heart was breaking. I have never met one who understood about losing someone so deeply that the world loses color. You are different, Clara. And I want to know you better." The use of her first name sent a thrill through her. She knew she should be cautious, should protect her heart, but the earnestness in his eyes made her want to take the risk. "Yes," she said, "you may court me." His smile was radiant. "Thank you. I promise I will be worthy of your trust." They spent the next hour exploring the canyon, and James told her about his life. He had come to Arizona 5 years earlier from Texas, following work. He was the youngest of 4 sons, and his family's small ranch had not been able to support them all. He had worked his way up from trail hand to a more permanent position at the Circle R, where he oversaw the horse herd. He was good with animals, he said, patient and gentle. Clara could believe it, watching the way he handled the horses, the calm confidence in his movements. She told him about Missouri, about her father who had died when she was 12, about the years she and her mother had managed alone, about how they had survived by taking and sowing and selling vegetables from the garden, about how her mother's illness had come on slowly at first, just a persistent cough, and then rapidly worsened until the doctor pronounced it consumption and said there was nothing to be done. "She made me promise to keep living," Clara said as they sat beside the pool, watching the play of light on the water. "To find joy where I could, but it is hard here. My aunt and uncle do not want me, not really. I am just another mouth to feed, another obligation, and I miss my mother every day." "Then we will have to find ways to bring you joy," James said firmly. "Starting with this." From his saddlebag, he produced a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He handed it to Clara, who unwrapped it carefully to reveal 3 packets of seeds: roses, tomatoes, and sweet peas. The same varieties she had been looking at in the general store. "James," she breathed, staring at the packets, "you should not have. I cannot afford to repay you." "I do not want repayment. I want to see you smile." He covered her hand with his, warm and calloused. "I know you think nothing will grow in Prescott, but I have an idea about that. Will you trust me?" Clara looked up at him, at the hope and determination in his face, and felt something shift inside her chest. "Yes," she said, "I will trust you." They rode back to town as the afternoon light began to slant toward evening, arriving at the leather shop with time to spare. Uncle Thomas came out to take the mare's reins, looking Clara over as if checking for damage. "Did you enjoy your ride?" "Very much, Uncle." "Mr. Thornton showed me a beautiful canyon with a spring." "Good, good." Her uncle turned to James. "You will come for Sunday dinner next week, Mr. Thornton. My wife will prepare something suitable." It was less an invitation than a command, but James accepted graciously. "I would be honored, sir. Thank you." As Clara dismounted, James caught her hand briefly, squeezing her fingers. "Until next week, Clara." "Until then," she echoed, and carried the seed packets inside like precious treasures. The days that followed passed with agonizing slowness. Clara went about her work in the leather shop, stitching and riveting, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought about the canyon, about James's stories, about the way he had looked at her beside the spring. She kept the seed packets in her room, taking them out each night to study the illustrations, imagining what it would be like to see those plants growing again. Aunt Margaret noticed her distraction and was not pleased. "Do not get ahead of yourself, girl," she warned. "One outing does not make a marriage proposal, and even if it did, life as a cowboy's wife is hard. You would do better to set your sights on a merchant or a clerk, someone with prospects." But Clara did not want a merchant or a clerk. She wanted James, with his kind eyes and gentle hands, his understanding of loss and his determination to bring her joy. She wanted the way he made her feel seen and valued, as if she were more than just an orphan and a burden. Sunday arrived at last. Aunt Margaret prepared a meal of roasted chicken, potatoes, and beans, along with biscuits and a dried apple pie. It was more elaborate than their usual fare, and Clara knew her aunt was trying to impress James, or perhaps his employer's patronage. She helped set the table with the good dishes, smoothing the tablecloth anxiously. James arrived promptly at noon, dressed in clean trousers and a pressed shirt, his hair still damp from washing. He brought flowers, a bouquet of desert blooms that must have taken him hours to gather. Aunt Margaret accepted them with a stiff nod, but Clara saw the way her expression softened slightly. Even her sour aunt was not immune to such thoughtful gestures. Dinner was a stilted affair at first, with Uncle Thomas interrogating James about his wages, his prospects, and his intentions. James answered every question patiently and honestly. Yes, he made decent money. Yes, he had savings. Yes, he hoped to have his own place someday. And yes, his intentions toward Clara were honorable. "I care for your niece," James said plainly, meeting Uncle Thomas's gaze without flinching. "I know we have not known each other long, but I believe she is someone worth knowing. someone worth courting properly, and if she will have me eventually, someone worth marrying. The bold statement made Clara's cheeks burn, but her heart soared. Across the table, James caught her eye and smiled, a private smile just for her. After dinner, Uncle Thomas permitted them to sit on the front porch while he and Aunt Margaret retreated inside for their Sunday rest. It was the first time Clara and James had been alone since the canyon, and the air felt charged with possibility. "Your uncle is a hard man," James observed, settling into one of the rough wooden chairs. "He is practical," Clara said, taking the chair beside him. "He does not believe in sentiment or romance. Everything must have a purpose, a profit." "And what do you believe in?" Clara considered the question. "I believe in kindness, in beauty for its own sake, in tending things and watching them grow. I believe my mother was right when she said that the world needs people who care for growing things, because they remind us that life continues even in hard times." "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." James reached across the space between their chairs to take Clara's hand. "I have been thinking about what you need, a place to garden, and I have an idea, but I need your help to make it work." "What kind of idea?" "A greenhouse," James said, his eyes lighting with enthusiasm. "A proper structure with glass walls and a roof where you could control the temperature and the moisture, where you could grow anything you wanted, regardless of the desert heat." Clara stared at him. "James, such a thing would be impossibly expensive. The glass alone would cost a fortune." "Not if we use salvaged glass." He leaned forward eagerly. "There is an old mining camp about 20 miles east of here, abandoned 5 years ago when the silver played out. The buildings are falling down, but many of them had glass windows. Good glass, just sitting there waiting to be taken. I rode out there last week to look. There is enough to build a decent-sized greenhouse, I am sure of it." "But the work involved," Clara protested, even as hope began to bloom in her chest. "The time, the effort. And where would we build such a thing? My uncle has no yard, no space." "There is space at the ranch," James said. "A spot near the barn that gets good light but is sheltered from the worst wind. My boss is a good man. I spoke with him already, and he said if I wanted to build a greenhouse on my own time, he had no objection. And the work does not frighten me, Clara. I am used to hard work. What matters is whether you would want such a thing." "Want it?" Clara's voice came out choked. "James, it would be like a miracle, but I cannot ask you to do so much for me. We barely know each other." "Then we will get to know each other while we build it," James said simply. "What do you say? Will you help me create a garden?" Clara looked at this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice, who saw her grief and wanted to ease it, who understood about loss and beauty and the importance of growing things. How could she refuse? "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will help you." James grinned, and before Clara could react, he raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. The gesture was courtly and old-fashioned, and made her feel like a character in one of the romantic novels she sometimes borrowed from the lending library. They began planning immediately. James would take a wagon to the abandoned mining camp the following Saturday and start hauling glass back to the ranch. He would need several trips, he estimated, but the weather was holding fair and he could spare the time. Meanwhile, Clara would begin designing what she wanted to grow, making lists of plants that would thrive in a controlled environment, thinking about layout and organization. "I will need to clear it with my uncle," Clara said reluctantly. "He will want to know why I am spending time at the ranch." "Tell him the truth. Tell him I am courting you and that we are building something together. If he objects, I will speak with him myself." Uncle Thomas did object, but only mildly. He seemed to view the greenhouse project as a positive sign. evidence that James was serious about Clara and willing to invest effort in making her happy. "A man who will work that hard for a woman's smile is a man who will provide," he told Clara. "You could do worse." It was not exactly a ringing endorsement, but it was permission, and that was all Clara needed. The next Saturday, she rode out to the Circle R ranch with James, her heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. The ranch was larger than she had imagined, sprawling across several hundred acres with a sturdy main house, a long bunkhouse for the hands, barns and corrals and outbuildings. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and horses ran in a large pen near the barn. James introduced her to his boss, a grizzled rancher named Tom Whitmore who eyed Clara with shrewd kindness. "So you are the young lady James has been talking about. He says you are a gardener." "I hope to be again, sir," Clara replied. "Your man is very kind to help me." "James is one of my best workers," Whitmore said. "If he wants to spend his free time building a greenhouse, I have no objection. Just do not distract him from his duties." "No, sir. I would not dream of it." Whitmore showed them the spot James had mentioned, a level area near the barn that received sun most of the day but was protected from the prevailing winds by the bulk of the building. It was perfect. Clara could already imagine the greenhouse standing there, its glass walls catching the light, rows of plants thriving inside. "It will be beautiful," she said softly. "It will be yours," James corrected. "A place where you can remember your mother and grow things again, a place where you belong." Over the following weeks, the greenhouse began to take shape. James made trip after trip to the abandoned mining camp, returning each time with his wagon loaded with window frames, panes of glass wrapped carefully in old blankets, even some intact glass doors. The glass was old and wavy, some of it slightly greenish, but it was sound and whole. Clara helped him sort through the pieces, cleaning them, checking for cracks. On Sundays after church, she would ride out to the ranch and work alongside James as he constructed the frame. He was a skilled carpenter, she discovered, able to measure and cut and join wood with precision. He built a foundation of stone and laid a floor of packed earth. He erected corner posts and roof beams, calculating angles and stresses with a natural understanding of structure. Clara watched him work with growing admiration. There was something deeply attractive about his competence, the way his muscles flexed as he lifted heavy timbers, the concentration on his face as he fitted pieces together. But more than the physical attraction, she was drawn to his patience and his determination. Nothing frustrated him. If something did not fit, he simply adjusted it. If a piece of glass broke, he found another. He worked steadily and methodically, and the greenhouse grew wall by wall, pane by pane. They talked as they worked, sharing stories and dreams. James told her about his childhood in Texas, about learning to ride before he could walk, about the brother who had died of fever when James was 10. Clara told him about her schooling, how she had loved reading and arithmetic, how her teacher had said she was bright enough to become a teacher herself if she wanted, how that dream had died with her mother. "Why did it die?" James asked, pausing in his work to look at her. "You are still bright. You could still teach if you wanted." "It is not practical," Clara said, echoing her uncle's favorite phrase. "I have no money for normal school, no connections. And even if I did, women teachers are expected to be unmarried. Once you marry, you are expected to leave the profession." "That seems foolish," James said. "Why should marriage disqualify someone from teaching? I suppose because you are expected to be busy with your own children." Clara felt her cheeks warm at the mention of children, at the implication of marriage between them. James noticed her blush and smiled. "Would you want children? Someday, I mean." "Yes," Clara admitted. I always imagined having a daughter and teaching her to garden as my mother taught me, passing on that knowledge and that love." "Then you shall have it," James said firmly. "A daughter and a garden and anything else you desire. I will make sure of it." The absolute certainty in his voice made Clara's eyes sting with sudden tears. "How can you promise such things? You barely know me." James set down his hammer and came to stand before her, his hands settling gently on her shoulders. "I know you better than you think. I know you are kind and strong. I know you carry grief but have not let it make you bitter. I know you see beauty in small things and value growth in life. I know that when you smile, which you do not do often enough, it lights up your whole face. And I know that I am falling in love with you, Clara Mitchell, and I want to spend my life making you happy." Clara's breath caught. "You love me." "I do." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I know it is soon, but I have never been more certain of anything. I love you and I want to marry you if you will have me, James." She reached up to touch his face, feeling the rasp of stubble beneath her palm. "I am falling in love with you too. I was afraid to admit it, afraid it was too fast, too impossible. But yes, yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, a gentle brush of lips that sent warmth flooding through her body. It was Clara's first kiss, and it was perfect, tender and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "We should speak with your uncle," James said. "Ask for his blessing properly." "He will give it," Clara said confidently. "He already sees you as a good prospect." They rode back to town that evening as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Clara felt as if she were floating, her heart so full she could barely contain it. She was engaged. She was going to marry James Thornton, this wonderful man who had built her a greenhouse because she missed her mother's garden. It seemed impossible, like a fairy tale, but it was real. Uncle Thomas received the news with gruff approval. "About time. I was beginning to think you would never get around to it, Thornton. You have my blessing for what it is worth." "When do you plan to marry?" "As soon as Clara wishes," James said. "I have enough saved to furnish a small house, and Mr. Whitmore has offered me one of the ranch cottages at a reduced rent. We could be married within a month if Clara agrees." Clara looked at her aunt and uncle, at the small room where she had been sleeping, at the leather shop where she spent her days in drudgery. Then she looked at James, at the hope and love in his eyes, and knew there was only one answer. A month would be perfect. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Aunt Margaret, for all her sour disposition, proved surprisingly helpful in preparing for the wedding. She helped Clara sew a dress from cream-colored muslin, simple but pretty, with lace at the collar and cuffs. She shared her own wedding veil, yellowed with age but still serviceable. She even baked a cake, a luxury Clara had not expected. Meanwhile, the greenhouse was completed. James installed the last panes of glass, built a door that opened smoothly, and created a system of shelves along the walls for potting plants. He dug a channel to bring water from a nearby well, so Clara could irrigate her plants easily. He even built a small workbench where she could start seeds and mix soil. When it was finished, James brought Clara out to see it at sunset. The greenhouse glowed in the fading light, its salvaged glass catching the colors of the sky, transforming the simple structure into something magical. Inside, the air was already warmer than outside, the glass trapping the day's heat. Clara walked slowly through the space, imagining it filled with plants, with green growing things, with the life and beauty she had missed so desperately. "It is perfect," she said, turning to James with tears streaming down her face. "It is absolutely perfect. I do not know how to thank you. You already have." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "You said yes. That is all the thanks I need." They planted the first seeds that evening, working together by lamplight. Tomatoes in large pots filled with rich soil James had brought from the canyon. Roses along the south wall where they would get the most sun. Sweet peas climbing strings James had strung from floor to ceiling. Clara handled each seed with reverence, pressing them into the soil, watering them gently, whispering prayers for growth. "My mother used to say that gardening was an act of faith," she told James as they worked. "You put seeds into the ground believing they will sprout, even though you cannot see them growing. You tend and water and wait, trusting in the process." She said it was good practice for life, learning to have faith in things you cannot see. "Your mother was a wise woman," James said. "And she raised a wise daughter." They were married on a clear Saturday morning in late July in the small church in Prescott. The ceremony was simple, attended by Uncle Thomas and Aunt Margaret, by Tom Whitmore and several of the ranch hands who had become friends of James's, by a few of Clara's acquaintances from the lending library. The preacher read from Corinthians about love being patient and kind, and Clara felt the words settle into her heart like seeds in fertile soil. When James slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band he had saved for months to afford, Clara felt a completeness she had not experienced since her mother's death. She was no longer alone. She had a partner, a companion, someone who loved her and wanted to build a life with her. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside and food contributed by the ranch hands and their families. There was roasted beef and fresh bread, beans and corn, and even a few precious vegetables from someone's struggling garden. The wedding cake Aunt Margaret had made sat in a place of honor, its white frosting decorated with real flowers. As the afternoon wore on, someone produced a fiddle and there was music, the lively tunes of reels and waltzes. James danced with Clara, holding her close, spinning her under the vast Arizona sky. She had never been much of a dancer, but in his arms she felt graceful, confident. When they danced past the greenhouse, its glass walls reflecting the celebration, Clara felt her heart might burst from happiness. "What are you thinking?" James asked, smiling down at her. "That I am the luckiest woman alive," Clara said honestly. 6 months ago I had lost everything, and now I have you and a home and a place to grow things again. It feels like a miracle." "Not a miracle," James said, "just love. And hard work, and a lot of salvaged glass." They laughed together, and Clara thought about how laughter had been missing from her life for so long. James had given that back to her too, along with so much else. Their cottage was small but cozy, 2 rooms with a fireplace and a real wood floor. James had furnished it simply, with a bed and a table and chairs, a chest for their clothes, a few shelves for Clara's books. It was not much, but to Clara it was a palace. It was theirs. That first night as husband and wife, James was gentle and patient, aware that Clara was nervous and inexperienced. He took his time, kissing her softly, murmuring reassurances, making sure she felt safe and loved. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that brought tears to Clara's eyes. This was what she had been missing all her life without knowing it, this intimacy, this connection, this sense of being wholly known and wholly accepted. Afterward they lay together in the darkness, James's arms around her, her head on his chest listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," Clara whispered. "I will love you all my life." "And I will love you," James replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Every day I will work to deserve you." "You already do," Clara said. "You already do." Life settled into a rhythm. James worked long days on the ranch, tending the horses, mending fences, helping with the cattle drives when necessary. Clara kept house and spent hours in her greenhouse, tending the plants that grew with surprising vigor in the protected environment. The tomatoes produced heavy clusters of fruit. The roses bloomed, filling the greenhouse with their perfume. The sweet peas climbed their strings and burst into flowers of purple and pink. Word spread about Clara's greenhouse, and soon other ranch wives were coming to visit, marveling at the lush growth, asking advice about their own gardens. Clara found herself teaching them what she knew, sharing seeds and cuttings, helping them understand how to coax life from the harsh desert soil. She had a gift for it, people said, inherited from her mother. She could make anything grow. With the vegetables from her greenhouse, Clara was able to contribute to their household income. She sold tomatoes and lettuce and beans at the market in Prescott, earning small amounts that nonetheless added up. More importantly, she felt useful, productive, as if she were honoring her mother's memory by continuing the work they had shared. As autumn arrived and the brutal summer heat began to ease, Clara realized she had not had her monthly courses in some time. At first, she attributed it to the change in her life, the stress of marriage and adjustment. But as weeks passed and other symptoms appeared, nausea in the mornings and a tenderness in her breasts, she began to suspect the truth. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with a complex mixture of joy and terror. She wanted a child, had always wanted to be a mother. But she was only 19, and the memory of her own mother's death was still raw. What if something went wrong? What if she was not ready? When she finally told James, on a cool October evening as they sat together in their cottage, he went very still. Then a smile spread across his face, so wide and genuine that it erased all Clara's fears. "We are going to have a baby?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "Yes," Clara confirmed. "Sometime in the spring, I think, April or May." James pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "This is the best news, the very best. We are going to be parents, Clara. We are going to have a family." His joy was infectious, and Clara felt her own worries recede. She was not alone in this. She had James, steady and strong and completely devoted to her. Together, they could face whatever came. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through fall and into winter. Clara continued to work in the greenhouse, though James insisted she not overexert herself. He took over the heavier tasks, hauling water and moving large pots, while Clara focused on the delicate work of planting and pruning. The greenhouse became even more precious to her now, a place where she could talk to her unborn child, sharing stories about its grandmother, about the gardens of Missouri, about the beauty of growing things. "You are going to be so loved," Clara would murmur, her hands on her growing belly. "Your father and I will give you everything we can, and I will teach you about plants, just as my mother taught me. You will know where you come from and how much you are wanted." James was attentive and tender during her pregnancy, bringing her wildflowers he found on rides, rubbing her aching feet in the evenings, reading aloud to her from the newspapers and books she loved. He was building a cradle in his spare time, carving it from smooth pine, sanding it until it was soft as silk. He wanted everything to be perfect for their child. In January, Clara's pregnancy became more difficult. She was tired all the time, her back aching, her ankles swelling. The baby was large and active, kicking constantly. But even in discomfort, she was grateful. This was a sign of life, of health. Her child was strong. As spring approached and Clara's time drew near, a midwife from Prescott, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson, came to examine her. "You are doing well," she pronounced. "The baby is positioned correctly and you are young and strong. I expect you will have an easy time of it." Clara hoped she was right. As March turned to April and the desert bloomed with unexpected wildflowers after a wet winter, she felt the first pangs of labor begin. They started gently, just a tightening across her belly, but gradually grew stronger and more frequent. James sent for Mrs. Henderson and stayed close to Clara, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement. The labor lasted through the day and into the evening, growing more intense as the hours passed. Clara thought of her mother, of how many times she must have endured this pain, and felt a new appreciation for the strength of women. Finally, as the sun set in a blaze of color outside their cottage window, Clara gave a final push and felt the baby slip free. There was a moment of breathless silence, and then a lusty cry filled the room. Mrs. Henderson held up the baby, red-faced and wailing, and announced, "You have a son, a son." Clara felt tears stream down her face as the midwife cleaned the baby and laid him on her chest. He was perfect, with a downy covering of dark hair and eyes that would be blue like his father's. His tiny hands gripped Clara's finger with surprising strength. "Hello, little one," Clara whispered. "Welcome to the world." James knelt beside the bed, staring at his son with an expression of absolute wonder. "He is beautiful. He is perfect. Clara, you did so well." "We did well," Clara corrected. "He is ours, James, our son." They named him Thomas James after both grandfathers, though they called him Tommy. He was a healthy baby, strong and hungry, with a pair of lungs that could wake the entire ranch when he chose to use them. Clara adored him fiercely, this tiny person who was part her and part James, who represented their love made manifest. Motherhood was exhausting but joyful. Clara spent her days caring for Tommy, nursing him and changing him and marveling at every small development. James was a devoted father, rising in the night to walk with the baby when he fussed, singing him soft songs, holding him with a gentleness that belied his rough hands. When Tommy was 3 months old and Clara felt strong enough, she began taking him to the greenhouse with her. She would settle him in a basket in the shade while she worked, talking to him about the plants, showing him the flowers, letting him feel the different textures of leaves and petals. He seemed to like it there, his eyes following the movements of butterflies that found their way inside, his baby coos echoing off the glass walls. "He will be a gardener like his mother," James predicted, watching them together. "Or a rancher like his father," Clara countered. "Or something entirely different. Whatever he chooses, we will support him." As Tommy grew from infant to baby to toddler, the greenhouse remained central to their lives. Clara continued to expand what she grew there, experimenting with new varieties, learning what thrived and what struggled. She grew herbs for cooking and medicine. She grew flowers to brighten their cottage and to sell at market. She grew vegetables that graced their table and brought in supplemental income. But more than the practical benefits, the greenhouse represented something deeper. It was a connection to her mother, a way of keeping that relationship alive. It was a testament to James's love, to the lengths he would go to make her happy. It was a place of peace and beauty in a sometimes harsh world. And it was a legacy she could pass to her son, teaching him as her mother had taught her. When Tommy was 2, Clara found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy felt easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She carried the baby through the summer and into fall, her belly growing round once more. Tommy, not quite understanding but sensing something was changing, would pat her stomach and say, "Baby," in his high, sweet voice. In November, Clara gave birth to their daughter. The labor was quicker this time, and by midnight, she held a tiny girl in her arms. The baby had auburn hair like Clara's and a delicate beauty that took her breath away. "She looks like you," James said softly, touching the baby's soft cheek. "She is going to be as beautiful as her mother." They named her Rose, after Clara's mother, and after the roses that bloomed in the greenhouse, the first plants Clara had grown in her new home. Rose was a quieter baby than Tommy had been, more contemplative, her wide green eyes seeming to take in everything around her. With 2 children, life became more hectic but no less joyful. Clara taught Tommy his letters and numbers while Rose napped. She took both children to the greenhouse, Tommy now old enough to help water plants while Rose watched from her basket. In the evenings, James would return from work and sweep both children into his arms, listening to Tommy's excited chatter about his day, cooing at Rose until she smiled. "This is what I always wanted," Clara told James one night as they sat together on their porch, watching the sun set. The children were asleep inside, and the world was quiet except for the evening sounds of the ranch. A family, a home, a place where things grow. "You have it," James said, taking her hand. "We have built it together, and it is only going to get better." He was right. As the years passed, their life together deepened and expanded. Tommy grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved horses as much as his father did. By the time he was 6, he was helping James with the ranch work, learning to rope and ride, showing a natural affinity for animals. But he also loved the greenhouse, helping Clara plant and harvest, asking endless questions about how things grew. Rose was more reserved, a thoughtful child who could spend hours in the greenhouse, sketching the plants in a notebook Clara had given her. She had an artist's eye, capturing the curve of petals and the structure of leaves with surprising accuracy. Clara encouraged this talent, buying her pencils and paper when she could afford them, praising her daughter's work. Clara and James added to their family over the years. Another son arrived when Tommy was 6 and Rose was 4, a sturdy baby they named Samuel after James's father. Then came twin girls, unexpected and overwhelming when Clara was 28. They named them Lily and Violet, continuing the flower theme. The cottage grew crowded, and Tom Whitmore, who had become almost a grandfather figure to their children, offered them a larger house on the ranch at a rent they could afford. Through it all, the greenhouse remained a constant. Clara tended it faithfully, and it rewarded her efforts with abundance. She had expanded it twice over the years, James adding new sections as their income allowed. Now it was large enough to walk through, almost like being in a real garden. She grew fruit trees in large planters, espaliered against the walls. She had roses of every color, their perfume filling the air. She had beds of vegetables and rows of herbs, shelves of succulents and trailing vines. The greenhouse had become famous in the area. People traveled from miles around to see it, to marvel at what Clara had managed to create in the harsh desert. She gave tours, shared advice, sold plants and seeds. It had become a small business, contributing meaningfully to their family income. More than that, it had become a gathering place, a spot of beauty where people could come to find peace. As Clara approached 40, she sometimes stood in the greenhouse and thought about how far she had come. The grief-stricken girl who had arrived in Arizona 15 years earlier felt like a different person. That girl had been lost and lonely, mourning her mother and seeing no future beyond drudgery. Now Clara was a wife and mother, a skilled gardener, a beloved member of the community. She had 5 children who were healthy and happy. She had a husband who loved her as deeply after 15 years as he had on their wedding day. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. His hair was graying at the temples now, and there were lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but to Clara, he was as handsome as ever. "I was thinking about how grateful I am," Clara said, leaning back against him. "For you, for this place, for our life together. I was thinking about how you built me a greenhouse out of salvaged glass, and how that one act of kindness changed everything." "It was not just kindness," James said. "It was love. I loved you from the moment I saw you in that store, looking at those seed packets. I knew I wanted to be the person who brought you joy, who helped you heal, Building the greenhouse was just the beginning, and what a beginning it was. Clara turned in his arms to face him. You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. A connection to my mother, a way to honor her memory. And you gave me a future I never imagined, full of love and family and beauty. We gave it to each other, James corrected. You brought light into my life too, Clara. Before you, I was just going through the motions, working and drifting. You gave me purpose. You gave me a reason to build and create and dream. They kissed, a long, sweet kiss that held 15 years of love and partnership. Around them, the greenhouse glowed in the afternoon light, its walls catching the sun, its plants rustling softly in the faint breeze that found its way inside. It was a monument to love, to perseverance, to the power of beauty in harsh places. That evening, the family gathered for dinner at the large table James had built to accommodate their growing household. Tommy, now 15, tall and gangly and full of opinions. Rose, 13, quiet and artistic, already showing signs of the beauty she would become. Samuel, 9, sturdy and practical like his father. And the twins, 6 years old, Lily and Violet, identical in appearance but opposite in temperament, one bold and one shy. As they ate and talked and laughed together, Clara felt a profound contentment. This was what her mother had wanted for her, this full, rich life. This was what James had promised her, a family and a garden and joy where before there had been only grief. After dinner, Clara took Rose with her to the greenhouse to water the plants, a ritual they shared most evenings. Her daughter moved among the plants with practiced ease, knowing exactly how much water each needed, which ones to check for pests, which ones were ready to be pruned or repotted. "Mama," Rose said as they worked, "when you were my age, did you know you wanted to be a gardener?" Clara considered the question. "I knew I loved plants and growing things, but I did not know it would become such a big part of my life. When my mother died, I thought that part of me died too. It was your father who brought it back, who showed me that I could still have beauty and growth even in a place that seemed hostile to it." "That is very romantic," Rose said with a small smile. "He built you this whole greenhouse because you missed your mother's garden." "He did. It was the most loving thing anyone has ever done for me, besides giving me you children." Clara paused in her watering to look at her daughter. "You know, Rose, your grandmother would have loved you. She would have seen your talent for drawing, your gentle spirit, and she would have been so proud." "I wish I could have known her," Rose said wistfully. "In a way you do," Clara replied. "She is in this greenhouse, in every plant I grow from seeds that descended from her garden. She is in the knowledge I pass to you. She is in the love I have for growing things which came from her. People do not really leave us if we keep their memory alive." Rose nodded thoughtfully, then returned to her watering. Clara watched her daughter with a full heart. She was raising her children the way her mother had raised her, with love and patience and an appreciation for beauty. The cycle continued, generation to generation, rooted in the soil of family and love. As the years continued to pass, Tommy fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher and married at 20. Clara helped him and his bride, a sweet girl named Sarah, start their own small greenhouse near their new home. She gave them cuttings and seeds, shared her knowledge, and watched with pride as they created their own growing space. Rose, at 17, won a scholarship to an art school in California, her talent finally receiving the recognition it deserved. It was hard to let her go, but Clara and James knew it was important to support their daughter's dreams. They sent her off with tears and pride, trusting that the strong roots they had given her would sustain her wherever she went. Samuel showed an interest in ranching and began working more formally with his father, learning the business side of the operation. He was steady and reliable, with a good head for numbers and management. Tom Whitmore had hinted that when he finally retired, he might sell the ranch to James and Samuel together, keeping it in the family they had become. The twins were still young, full of energy and possibility. Lily wanted to be a teacher, already showing a gift for explaining things to younger children. Violet loved animals and spent hours in the barn with the horses and barn cats, nurturing anything that needed care. Clara, now in her mid-40s, found gray threading through her auburn hair and lines marking her face, but she had never felt more content. She had lived to see her children grow and thrive. She had built something lasting with James, a partnership that had weathered every storm. And she had her greenhouse, more beautiful than ever, a testament to what could be created from salvaged materials and stubborn hope. On their 20th wedding anniversary, James surprised Clara with a new addition to the greenhouse, a small fountain he had built from stacked stones, with water that circulated from a hidden pump. The sound of running water added a new dimension to the space, and Clara wept when she saw it. "You are always finding new ways to give me joy," she told him. "After 20 years, you still surprise me." "That is because I still love you as much as I did the day I saw you looking at those seed packets," James said. "More, actually, because now I know you so well. I know your strength and your kindness. I know how you love our children and how you have built this place into something magical, and I want to keep making you happy for as many years as we have left." "Then we should have at least 20 more," Clara said, kissing him. "At least." They held a celebration for their anniversary, inviting friends and family to the greenhouse for a party. Tommy came with Sarah and their infant son, Clara's first grandchild. Rose sent a painting she had created, a beautiful watercolor of the greenhouse that captured its light and life perfectly. The community Clara had built over the years turned out in force, bringing food and gifts, sharing stories and laughter. As Clara looked around at the faces of people she loved, at the plants she had nurtured, at the glass walls that held it all together, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had lost so much, her mother and her first home, the green gardens of her childhood. But in losing, she had found something new. She had found James and love and partnership. She had found a way to honor her past while building a future. She had found that even salvaged, broken things could be made into something beautiful. The greenhouse stood as proof of that. Built from windows torn from abandoned buildings, from glass that had been discarded and forgotten, it had become something precious and life-giving. Just like her life, Clara thought. Just like all of them, really, salvaged and restored and made whole. In the years that followed, Clara became a grandmother several times over. Tommy and Sarah had 3 children, all strong and healthy. Rose married a fellow artist she met in California and brought him home to meet the family, a gentle man who clearly adored her. Samuel married a rancher's daughter and stayed local. Building a house on ranch land Tom Whitmore sold them at a good price. The twins finished school, Lily indeed becoming a teacher in Prescott, while Violet studied animal husbandry and helped Samuel manage the ranch. Through it all, Clara tended her greenhouse. It was her meditation, her prayer, her connection to everything that mattered. She taught her grandchildren there, just as she had taught her own children, passing on the knowledge that had been given to her. She showed them how to test soil, how to judge when a plant needed water, how to prune and propagate and nurture growth. "This greenhouse is your legacy, Grandma," Tommy's oldest daughter said one day when she was about 10. "Papa says you and Grandpa built it out of old glass when you were first married." "That is right," Clara confirmed. "Your grandfather gathered the glass from abandoned buildings and built this place for me because I missed gardening. It was an act of love. Will you teach me everything you know?" The girl asked seriously. So I can have a greenhouse someday too. I will teach you everything, Clara promised. And one day this greenhouse will be yours if you want it. It should stay in the family, passed from one generation to the next, just like the knowledge of how to use it. James was slowing down as he entered his 60s, his body bearing the wear of decades of hard physical labor. He could no longer ride all day or lift heavy loads, but he remained active, helping Samuel manage the ranch from a more supervisory role. He spent more time with Clara in the greenhouse now, content to sit and watch her work, offering advice or simply enjoying her company. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked him one afternoon as they sat together among the plants. "Taking a chance on me when we barely knew each other?" "Building all this? Never," James said firmly. "Not for one single moment. You are the best decision I ever made, Clara. You and this life we built together." "I feel the same," Clara said, taking his hand. "I came to Arizona lost and grieving, and you gave me purpose again. You showed me that love could heal even the deepest wounds. I will always be grateful for that." They sat in comfortable silence, surrounded by the green life Clara had coaxed from seeds and cuttings. Outside, the desert stretched harsh and brown, but here inside the glass walls, there was beauty and abundance. It was a metaphor for their marriage, Clara thought. They had created a sheltered space where love could grow despite the harshness of the world around them. As Clara moved into her 60s, she noticed changes in herself. Her joints ached in the mornings. Her eyes needed spectacles for close work. Her energy was not what it had been, but she did not mourn these changes. They were signs of a life well lived, of years spent in purposeful activity. She had earned every gray hair, every line, every ache. She began training her granddaughter more seriously, teaching the girl not just the mechanics of gardening but the philosophy behind it. "Plants teach us patience," she told her. "They cannot be rushed. They grow in their own time, at their own pace. We can provide good conditions, but ultimately they will do what they are meant to do. People are the same way." She taught about resilience too, about how plants could survive harsh conditions if they were strong at the root. About how pruning, though it seemed cruel, actually promoted healthier growth. About how every plant had a purpose and a season, and wisdom lay in accepting both. The lessons were about more than gardening, and the girl knew it. She drank in her grandmother's words, asking questions, thinking deeply, understanding that she was receiving something precious. James grew frailer as he moved through his 60s. A fall from a horse when he was 67 left him with a broken leg that never quite healed right. After that, he walked with a cane and spent most of his time around the house and greenhouse. But he remained cheerful, refusing to complain, finding joy in his grandchildren and in watching Clara work. "You are still as beautiful as the day I met you," he told her on their 30th anniversary. "More so, actually. Age has only refined you. You are a terrible liar," Clara said affectionately, "but I love you for it. I am not lying. You are beautiful, and I am the luckiest man alive." When James suffered a heart attack at 69, Clara was devastated but not surprised. He had been growing weaker, sleeping more, eating less. She held his hand in the hospital in Prescott, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, and told him how much she loved him. "Thank you," James whispered, his voice barely audible. "Thank you for saying yes. For building this life with me, for giving me a family." "Thank you for the greenhouse," Clara replied, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for seeing me when I was lost, for loving me, for giving me everything." He smiled, squeezed her hand weakly, and closed his eyes. He passed peacefully with his family around him, slipping away as gently as he had lived. Clara grieved deeply but not desperately. She had loved James for 30 years, had built a life with him, had children and grandchildren because of him. She had been blessed, and she knew it. The pain of loss was the price of love, and she would pay it willingly for all they had shared. She found comfort in the greenhouse, in the work of tending and growing. It was here that she felt closest to James, in this space he had built for her out of salvaged glass and devoted love. She could almost feel his presence among the plants, could imagine his voice offering encouragement or praise. Her children worried about her living alone, but Clara insisted she was fine. She had the greenhouse, her work, her grandchildren who visited often. She had a community that loved her. She had purpose. At 68, she was still strong enough to tend her plants, still mentally sharp enough to manage the small business the greenhouse had become. On what would have been her 35th wedding anniversary, Clara stood in the greenhouse at sunset, watching the light play through the old salvaged glass. The walls glowed gold and orange, and the plants cast long shadows. It was beautiful, achingly so, and Clara felt James's absence like a physical weight. But she also felt his love, present and enduring. He was in every pane of glass he had carefully installed. He was in the sturdy frame he had built to last. He was in the legacy they had created together, children and grandchildren who knew how to love and work and build. "I miss you," Clara said aloud, her voice echoing softly. "But I am grateful. For every day we had, for everything you gave me. You saved me, James. You showed me that life could be beautiful again after loss, and I will carry that lesson until we are together again." A breeze rustled through the plants, and Clara chose to believe it was James's way of answering. She smiled, wiped her eyes, and picked up her watering can. There was work to be done, plants to tend, life to nurture. That was how she would honor his memory, by continuing the work they had started together, by tending the garden he had made possible. Clara lived another 10 years, active and engaged until nearly the end. She taught 2 more generations of grandchildren about gardening. She saw the greenhouse expanded one final time, a project her sons undertook in her honor. She attended weddings and births, funerals and celebrations, remaining a central figure in her large, loving family. When she finally passed at 78, peacefully in her sleep, she left behind a legacy that extended far beyond the greenhouse. She left children who knew how to love and work. She left grandchildren who understood the value of patience and growth. She left great-grandchildren who would never know her, but would hear stories about the woman who had turned salvaged glass into a garden, who had transformed grief into beauty. The greenhouse remained, maintained by the family, a gathering place and a memorial. Tommy's granddaughter, the one Clara had trained so carefully, took over its management, running it as both a working nursery and a community space. She taught her own children there, continuing the cycle Clara and her mother before her had begun. People still talked about Clara and James, about the cowboy who had built a greenhouse for the woman he loved, about how their devotion to each other had created something that lasted generations. The story became local legend, a romantic tale of love and loss and redemption, of how 2 people could build a life together from salvaged materials and stubborn hope. And inside the greenhouse, among the roses and tomatoes and sweet peas, among the fruit trees and herbs and flowers, Clara's spirit seemed to linger. Visitors reported feeling a sense of peace there, of being welcomed and loved. The plants thrived in ways that seemed almost magical, as if they were still being tended by unseen, caring hands. The salvaged glass walls, some pieces now more than 100 years old, continued to catch the light, turning an ordinary structure into something luminous and sacred. And anyone who took the time to look closely could see that it was more than just a greenhouse. It was a monument to love, a testament to what could be built when 2 people committed to tending each other, and their shared dreams with the same devotion they gave to growing things. In the end, Clara's mother had been right. Gardening was an act of faith, of believing in growth even when you could not see it happening. Clara had taken that lesson and applied it to her entire life, tending her marriage and her family with the same patience and devotion she gave her plants. And the harvest had been abundant beyond measure. The greenhouse stood as proof, its walls of salvaged glass holding beauty and life, a structure built from broken things made whole again through love. Just like Clara herself, who had come to Arizona broken by grief and had been made whole by a cowboy who saw her pain and decided to build her something beautiful. Just like James, who had been drifting through life until he found a woman worth building for. Just like all of us, really, salvaged and restored and made new by love. And so the story lived on, passed from generation to generation along with the seeds and cuttings, the knowledge and the love. The greenhouse remained, a physical reminder that even in the harshest environments, with patience and devotion and a little salvaged glass, you could create a place where anything could grow, where love could flourish, where beauty could thrive, where broken people could be made whole again. That was Clara's legacy, the gift she gave to everyone who knew her or heard her story. The knowledge that it was never too late to grow something beautiful, that love could heal even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes all it took was someone willing to gather salvaged glass and build you a place where your dreams could take root and flourish. Her mother's garden lived on, not in Missouri but in Arizona, not in the past but in the present and future, tended by loving hands generation after generation, a living testament to the enduring power of love and growth and beauty in even the harshest places.